Rising and welcome to Behind the Curtain. Today we are speaking with Lily Martirossian. Grand Rising, Lily.
Hello.
Thank you for coming, Lily.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so one of the reasons I asked Lily to come on the show was that I went into her nursery in July. Was it June? And I saw some wonderful work happening in the nursery, and it really inspired me to see what you were doing, the creativity and working with emotions with the children. And I had a lot of fun that morning, and I went back this week to gauge how they were at the beginning of term, and it was just as relaxed as the first time. So, Lily, you're doing extraordinary work, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron.
So, Lily, I start with, I noticed you talk about, with the children, or you talk about emotions and how they feel. Can you go into a bit of that, please?
So, I work with 3 and 4 year olds, and when children are so young, often they feel things in really big ways, but they don't necessarily have the words to be able to articulate what it is that's happening inside them. So when the children arrive, a big part of the work that we do, it's me and a big team of others that work together to help them all. We've tried a new strategy in the last year or so. It's an emotion coaching strategy. I went on a really inspiring course and took this from the course materials. And one of the things I love about it is it's got an easy to remember acronym called CALM. C stands for connect, A stands for acknowledge, L is for limit setting, and M is make a plan. So I want the children to feel understood, and I want them to feel like they can be themselves, and that feeling different things is part and parcel of being human, and it's okay and safe to feel a variety of emotions. But in order for them to understand that, we need to create language and conversation around it. So this acronym CALM really helps with that, I find.
Can you explain it's connect, acknowledge? What was the other two?
Limit setting and make a plan.
Limit setting and make a plan. Okay. So how would that work? Or can you give us an example of how that's used in the classroom with the kids?
Sure. So, for example, if 2 children really want to play with the same dinosaur and they haven't quite got the words to say how much they want it, and how to navigate taking it in turns, there can be a situation where one child hurts another child to get the toy that they need. This isn't uncommon when children are very young, when they're 3 and 4. So, I mean, as part of the work I do, I also give them phrases such as, please can I have it when you're finished? We practice those hundreds of times at the beginning so that feels really familiar. Although in the moment, sometimes you can't find the words. So if a child hurts another child because they're feeling really cross, I might walk over to the situation and acknowledge how both of the children are feeling. I did mention to Ron when he was with us that sometimes, because we have quite a large cohort of children and there are 5 of us who work with the children, first of all, I'm always connecting with myself to check, am I actually in the right frame of mind, in the right space to manage the situation? For the children, for me, it may be that the answer is yes, in which case I've connected with myself and then I go help the children. It might be that I actually think, no, right now in this moment, it's not going to be me. I'm going to actually pass the baton on to another member of staff to help the children. So connecting, which is the first part of the acronym, is not just with the child, but first of all, the grown-up needs to connect with themselves to check in. So yeah, I connect with myself first, and then if I'm feeling in the right place to be able to help the child, I'll go over and say, well, actually, at this point, I'm not saying anything. A lot of the connection happens through body language. So I think it's lots of nonverbal. The child or the children feel understood, that this grown-up's not here to quickly close the situation down or come up with a fast resolution. It's a process and we're all part of it. So I think that's a lot of what happens at the connect stage. And also noticing how that child might be feeling, not necessarily having a name for it yet, but just feeling that in your body a little bit. Acknowledging their feelings is when I would start to name what's happening after I've connected. So A for acknowledge. And recently, another member of staff shared with me a really amazing resource. It's called a colour feelings wheel, and you can see it just on a simple Google search. What I love about it is it's got 3 layers. The centre has 7 emotions in the middle. I've actually got it here with me so I can tell you what they are. So it says fearful, angry, disgusted, sad, happy, surprised, and bad. And that's the core. But around the core, we have another layer where for each of those emotions, there's a nuanced version that's maybe 7 or 8 different things, words that capture that feeling, but in different ways, depending on your experience. It might not be that you're feeling bad, you might be feeling tired or stressed or busy. So we have specific words to capture certain situations. And then layer 3 goes into even more nuance for children to be able to, and grown-ups to be able to say exactly what it is that's happened. So acknowledging the feeling would be actually giving it a name and saying, if that had happened to me, I would be feeling that too. And it's a real sense of visualization. And again, the connecting is still happening there because you're giving empathy and putting yourself in the shoes of the child at that stage. Limit setting isn't actually always necessary. It's there if what you've witnessed isn't safe and there needs to be a boundary put in place. In some situations that is required. And so, for example, if a child has hurt another child to get the dinosaur, the limit would be when you're feeling frustrated. You can show your frustration by squeezing your hands or stamping your feet. It's not okay to hurt your friend when you're feeling frustrated, but you can do these things instead. Examples of times where limit setting might not be required: if a child is feeling sad, they might not have done anything wrong, but they still need the emotion coaching to work through that sadness. So yeah, depending on the situation, the limit might be there or it might not be. I feel make a plan, which is the last part of it, is really powerful because it brings it all together. And children often need to go over things multiple times to actually be able to apply it again. So make a plan is really thinking about what's happened and what could we do next time we're feeling this way. And it's not uncommon for me to go over make a plan about 20 times with the child before they can tell me what it is they're going to do next time, because this is all very new to them. So in summary, that's what it's all about.
Wow, that's amazing. I think all schools should have this. I mean, this is something that I started practicing within myself in my own way, only like pretty relatively recently. So the fact that kids are learning to connect, and I love that you encourage them to connect with the body as well, because that's a big part of it. I've heard of noticing emotions in classroom settings in certain ways, but not as much as connecting with the body. That's such a huge part. And I think it's so valuable for kids to be validated and their emotions to be validated in that way, and to recognize, because we, growing up, a lot of us have parents that um, they didn't do that process on themselves. Their parents didn't do that with them. Kids were meant to be seen, not heard. That was the old thing that parents would say, and and I think a lot of trauma comes from experiences with kids sharing in the only way they know how to, but then being reprimanded, or made to, being told not to do it, but in a pejorative way. That it's just bad, and they take on this message that they're bad. So I'm glad that they're having these examples, that you provide to them in the classroom, to have these sort of healthy emotional sort of lexicon, just learning how to be with themselves in this way.
I really agree with you that so many of us, the only way we know is to be quite reactive and not really stop and connect with ourselves and with the other person. And that does get transferred from generation to generation. So I feel that this model can really help, big picture wise, for everyone: children, grown-ups, grandparents, all the generations can get on board with it. It would make a huge difference, I think.
Lily, what feedback have you got from parents in doing this work? I mean, it must be quite extraordinary when they are able to express how they feel, especially at the ages of 3 and 4.
Yeah, when you see it happening in the classroom, it's so special. When a child who hasn't been able to tell you what's happening, and sometimes that child has been somebody who has shown how they're feeling in their actions and not their words, and suddenly they're talking to us, they're saying things like, "This is what I need to help me to feel better." So yeah, that's really powerful. In terms of parent feedback, I have done 2 workshops on this with 2 separate nursery cohort of parents. It's generally well received, and I have had some parents tell me that it's really helped their child at home. I'm not sure, because people have really busy lives, how much consistency there is between home and school for some families, but I know that some families have really embraced it and they found it's worked for them. It's one of those things that requires time and space. So where parents have felt the value of it and been able to prioritize that in their lives, I think they're seeing impact.
I noticed that. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. I also think with the acronym, and when I reflect on my own practice before I came across this acronym, some of the labeling the emotions, I'd been taught that that's good practice, and I was practicing that already and really liked that. And the limit setting, I mean, as teachers, we have to put limits in place. So that was something else that I'd done before. But what I like about the CALM acronym is it brings focus to the other bits which actually really matter. And when you put it all together, it's quite cohesive. The make a plan as well, I feel like that's quite an important part not to miss, because it helps inform how the child's going to be next time. And if I'm being really honest, for children it can take thousands of interactions like this, because what's effectively happening is we're teaching a child how to self-regulate, but we're doing it with them. So this CALM acronym is co-regulation. The end goal is self-regulation, but that doesn't happen overnight. And that's something that if children can have all the grown-ups in their lives helping them to co-regulate in their childhoods, by the time that they're in their teens, in their 20s, it's going to feel quite automatic. But it's a process, it's not a quick fix. And where parents really are inspired by it, I think that's when I suppose that child's just really lucky to have those grown-ups around who are there to do that hundreds, thousands of times with them.
Yeah, it does sound like a process, and I think one of the wonderful things about it is that you do it on yourself first, it seems, and before doing it with them. As a parent, there's sometimes I'm in reactionary mode, and I'm just. But if I have this ability to pause before reacting and do the work myself and see what's connect with the emotion, then I can respond to the situation in a different way. So and I love the fact that they all the letters seem to work together, and the make a plan is really brilliant because it's co-creating it with the kids, and I feel like it gives them this sense. It sounds like this sense of empowerment, encouraging them to use their creativity, their intuition. These are things that are really, in a lot of ways, society and unfortunately parents not really, knowing any better. We tend to cut these things off. And kids end up suppressing or repressing their creativity and their intuition because the parents are just, saying what they've learned, just reacting, just don't do that, go do this, and the way that the kids are taking it in is, I'm bad, I'm not good enough, being angry is bad, being crying is not good, so it's great that you have that the kids that you work with and the parents are gaining these tools.
I read something recently that was talking about language that parents use to talk to their children, and so much of language used in homes from parents with their children is command language. So it's this needs to happen, this needs to happen, this is the agenda, and requiring from the child, but purely because that's the pace of the day to day and what needs to be achieved and routines and etc. etc. What was highlighted from the stuff that I read was basically that there isn't that much space for parents on average in average homes to actually talk with their children rather than at their children, and it takes a lot of intentionality for there to be enough space in people's lives to really talk with their children and have those quality conversations, and I would probably put calm as part of those quality conversations, but not just talking about our emotions, but just general back and forth conversations where nothing's actually trying to be achieved. We're just talking together.
Yeah, it that feels so true to me when you're in a day-to-day sort of, like, being a parent sometimes feels like a like survival thing, like a day-to-day, like, oh, we got to do this, go do this and that, like you're I don't know, in the military and you're just given instructions, go do this, that, and you're on the schedule, but not considering that taking time to communicate with the kids is an important part of that, and it needs to be as important or even more important as all those other details and things that need to be done. And when I'm able to do that, I feel like there's more of a connection between me and my kids, and they feel if things are less stressful, and actually things get done easier when we're working together, rather than, because I think they resist when I'm just barking orders at them, and then they kind of zone out as well, like zone me out. So
yeah, I mean, I'm not a parent myself, but I just think all the parents in the world, it's such a huge, important, amazing job that you guys have to do. I think, yeah, I don't know. I hope one day I can be a parent too, but for now, it's really fascinating for me to hear other people's anecdotes and to keep learning myself. There's so much more to know and to practice.
Yeah, and that part of talking with, but not talking to. It sounds so simple, but to really embrace that, I think that's really quite groundbreaking when we have these with conversations with young children. Can you talk to us a bit more about that talking with? And I saw as well, they were looking at you. They were really looking at you when you're speaking to each other. You're giving each other the attention.
Yeah, I think because it's a very busy environment, I have to be really intentional about talking with. And some moments are more successful than others. But yeah, I think first and foremost, I'm always trying to be on the child's level. So I'll go and crouch down so that we have that eye contact. And yeah, I find that already helps with the child feeling like they can be them and tell me everything they need to say. I try not to ask too many questions. So I try hearing what's been said and then thinking of a time maybe where I've experienced something similar. And I try to add to what they've already said rather than, I suppose, classic teacher mode. The way I was trained to teach was being really careful about your questions and asking interesting questions. And when children are so young, especially depending on their language level, sometimes the question isn't going to facilitate more being given from the child. So I think sometimes just adding even a noise like and giving them time to think a bit more, sometimes that facilitates them coming up with something really, really fascinating that they didn't know they had in their mind, but it's had the opportunity to grow. So I think, yeah, it's real patience and genuine interest, reflecting on my own experiences. Sometimes I ask a question too. Yeah, it's a strategy called sustained shared thinking that inspired my my want to try these sorts of conversations in my environment. And sustained shared thinking is a teaching strategy which class teachers who teach much older children would use, but you can actually apply it to very young children as well by creating the space. And yeah, I think my goal is always to keep going backwards and forwards, and I just keep that in my mind that I want to keep talking to you rather than closing this book and moving on. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like all part of that connection process as well. There's providing the space and providing the space and giving attention, which I think is a form of love. And I think that's what kids need more than anything. And going back to the household, a lot of times they don't get the attention because parents are busy, they're overtired, they're stressed, and so they don't get the just attention, someone just there with them. That I think a lot of times kids feel like, or we make them feel like they have to have the answers really quick, like say what you mean, like be assertive and like be a certain way. But or, yeah, be a certain way, but to give them attention and to be there with them and providing that space. I think they're learning compassion from that. They're learning empathy. There's so much that the kids are learning that they're taking away from that, I believe.
I think with the talking with as well, I learned this from one of my colleagues who has inspired lots of my practice. But she said to me very early on, she said, if a child is playing with sand and a bucket in the sand pit, and you rock up and you say, what colour is your bucket? High chance they really don't care about the colour of the bucket. They might be in process imagining something really important to them, their family, or a teddy bear they're missing, or even just thinking about the sounds around them. So in terms of talking with, I think going up to children and just being near them, joining in, maybe not saying anything yet, and just being together. Usually what then happens is the child will say something that is much more reflective of where they're at in that moment than I could ever know, because I'm not in their minds. So yeah, I try and, as much as I can, let it come from the child. Sometimes I can't help myself and I'll go over and say something that's excited me. And that can precipitate good conversation too. But I think the best conversations are where it started from the child, because there's so much going on in their minds that they want to share.
Yeah, and it that could be something that adults can do as well with each other, instead of the knee-jerk reactions that we have. Oh, it's going to be raining today, and talk about the weather or politics or something like things that we don't really care about, but it's like that sort of safety, familiar way to connect on this sort of surface area. But I bet with the kids, you get all sorts of interesting conversations that come up, when you're engaging in that way.
The other day when Ram came to our setting, we were speaking to one child who was fascinated by cricket, and he could capture so many things about a cricket match. He wanted to show us, role play with us, and for about, I think, maybe 20 minutes he was talking about cricket.
That was a wonderful conversation. The fact that she had learned all of these tricky concepts and ideas, but what I loved was her passion of talking about it. And she really involved me in what she was doing. And to share that with her, that was a wonderful experience. Lily, one of the things that I really got from when I went to your nursery is how it would move on in your ideal way of teaching, how it would move on, this way of teaching, going on to reception, then to year 1, year 2, up to year 6.
Are you putting the question to me now, what it would look like if we were to do that? So since I first discovered Calm, the school have actually amended their behaviour policy, and it's now called a healthy relationships and behaviour policy, I think. And they want to have an attachment aware award. So the school have trained everybody on the CALM acronym. And the goal is for everyone to be using this as much as possible in their interactions with all the children, not just in the early years, but across the school. So I think that's a really positive next step. And I would love to see that happening in all classrooms. I do appreciate that actually in the early years, so much of our day and time is allocated to personal, social, emotional development because it's one of the prime areas of learning. And as soon as children turn 5, the national curriculum comes in, and yes, that's still there, but it's so minimized compared to how much importance is given in the early years. So I think lots of that groundwork, and for some children who need it even more, is not there. So I think if I was creating education policy, I would not have children sat at desks age 5, and there would be a lot more space for children to play, for personal, social, emotional development to still be the priority, communication, language, and physical development. And I think there are other countries that do that. It's just not the way it is in the UK. There are other schools that do more free flow provision in year 1 and year 2. Some schools take it all the way through to year 6. They are few and far in between, but I would be looking to them to say, give us a kind of synopsis of how you got this to work, because I think that model is one that I really believe in. But I'm not a primary teacher, I'm an early years teacher. So I think if we had policymakers who had a different vision of what matters the most, then maybe we could see a model like that transferred to all schools everywhere.
Yeah, it's like that here in the United States as well. And there, at a certain point in schools, the priority becomes, getting the best grades on the tests and competing, having the highest, their school having higher averages than other schools, and it's indicative of our core values here in the United States of competition, earning money, just like money being the driving force, power, domination. And it sounds like what you do with the kids is teach them these core values of cooperation, community, compassion, empathy, love, respect, things that, like, imagine that was taught throughout the grade levels, how it would impact the way that our world was. So it sounds like it's so important for that to continue to be in place, but it gets overtaken by these other things that we hold being of more value, which is unfortunate. But I'm glad that it's being done somewhere. That you're doing it, and it only takes a few people to do it to start to create change, influence change.
Mm-hmm. I think I would love to see classrooms everywhere teaching this colour wheel, but in depth, so that every child, by the time they're 11, is freely using a variety of words from this colour emotion wheel and feeling confident to do so. Because I think if we can capture the nuance of exactly what it is that's going on, we'll be much more effective communicators. And as effective communicators, we can build relationships better. And with better relationships, when people come together and can talk and understand and share well, I think amazing things can happen. So yeah, I think if everyone could do the colour wheel and really care about it, then profound change could happen. But yeah, you're right, it starts on a very individual level. So I'm still getting very familiar with it, and yeah, I've got lots of growing to do with the colour wheel myself. So I look forward to being able to share that with my children as I keep growing and learning more.
Yeah, I love the idea of the color wheel, and just talking about the emotions um, is so powerful, because I think kids, a lot of times, because it's not talked about, they keep it to themselves, and sometimes they suffer from depression, and it manifests in all these unhealthy ways. A lot of, well, kids will turn to drugs and alcohol, abusing drugs and alcohol, and all different self-harm things that are violence. um, and it could be just because maybe they felt insecure, maybe they felt not good enough, and that feeling was so scary and not known. They weren't conscious of it because they didn't have the just the inner knowledge, the awareness. They haven't gone through that process of, oh, what is that feeling in the body? And then, oh, okay, I feel this in the diaphragm. Well, what is it? What's the name? Oh, it feels like I feel not good enough, or I feel wrong. And to be able to do that, to have the sort of conceptual framework in place, that they're not feeling ashamed or guilty because everyone's talking about it, and it's a really powerful tool to have. um, I think a lot of us repress. A lot of us are suffering from trauma. I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Dr. Gabor Mate. He's I think you'd love his work, because his focus is on trauma and how it starts in childhood, and that the trauma doesn't have to be like the big um, events that happen in life. Like some people have sexual abuse and things like that. Those are obviously traumatic, but um, it could be that a kid, let's say the kid's father wasn't there in life, and growing up the parents were divorced, and then the kid is now living with the father, but he's holding on to this resentment and anger, and he reacts. He yells, like his father tells him to do something, and he says, "No, I don't have to do it. You're not my dad." Now, the father may take that as a threat because he doesn't have that emotional maturity. So he might yell and say, "Don't you ever talk to me like that," And now the kid feels shut off and scared because the father's bigger and stronger. And what Dr. Gabor Mate would say is that is a trauma that has happened, that um, the way that we deal with the trauma, because we don't have like the conceptual framework of, you know, we use calm, and implement it into our lives. Unless they went to your class, then they would have it. But a lot of kids will hold their breath, because the emotion feels so big, and they'll repress. And that way of dealing with um, emotional pain or fear or that insecurity is to hold the breath, is to contract, is to repress. And so going through life, this comes out in all unhealthy ways, because you can repress, but it's gonna, as come out in some ways. And then we have the world that we're living in now, which could be looked at as a lot of kids that have a world with uh, that a world where the majority of people, maybe this is what he thinks, have gone through trauma. And so it's a huge part of his teaching, Dr. Gabor Mate. So, I think as soon as you started talking about it, his name popped up. So I think you might be interested in some of his work. He has tons of videos out there as well.
Thank you. I'll definitely look into him. You reminded me of some material I read by a lady called Lisa Dion, and she is a play therapist in the US, and she speaks about aggression, and specifically in the playroom. But one of the points she makes is that, like you're saying, there's a lot of repression that can happen from interactions with grown-ups, and when things are repressed, it can come out at some point it will come out. But what children are actually, what's happening in those moments is children are in the moment where they're expressing, maybe in not a safe way, but if they're expressing and it's being shut down very quickly, what we're teaching children is not to trust their bodies. And over a period of time, children subconsciously learn, I can't trust my natural impulses because when I do, they're shut down. So I think mind, body, and soul, they're so connected. And as humans, when we're expressing, which I suppose is the opposite of repressing, when we are expressing, we're trusting our body rhythms, what we need. That's our way of regulating ourselves. It's that expression. So of course we need boundaries in place so that we can keep ourselves and each other safe. That's why we need grown-ups to help us co-regulate. But I think being able to trust our bodies and what they need and being able to express is such an important part of being human. And I do agree with you that in so many of our interactions for lots of people in their lives, they've often been shut down in moments where they really needed to be heard. So yeah, I do think it's a really big thing that's not really seen by many people. I'm only starting to see it myself in very recent years. It's like wearing an extra pair of goggles and seeing everyone for who they really are, their stories, and we all behave in certain ways because of the experiences that we've had. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like, I really feel like what you're doing in the classroom and your approach is what we all need to be doing. I mean, it feels like this is like what school should be, and we're so like kind of in this sort of loop of, well, my kid has to get good grades because how is he going to survive? How's he going to compete? He needs to get into college. He needs to do this. He needs to do that. Yeah, and so much focus is there. And I wonder how we begin to shift that on a larger scale. Do you feel like what you've been doing has been like, it sounds like your school was very receptive to it. Is there any examples of where you were met with some resistance to it, or has it all been pretty positive for the most part?
I'd say it's been largely positive. The reality of doing it day to day as like consistent practice, depending on the moment, there are definitely challenges that you have to face. And again, I think it goes back to the experiences that every individual has had. So for somebody who has only ever known like maybe tough boundaries and being spoken to in a harsh tone or whatever it might be, whatever the normal is for that person, it can be hard to undo it. And I guess there's a lot of self-awareness which comes into that, and also believing and being inspired by a new approach. And for some grown-ups that comes easier than others. So I think there always will be resistance because as we were saying before, so many of us have only known a different way, and that feels normal and natural for us because those are the experiences we've had thousands of times. So that's what feels the most natural. I think it's all about, it comes back down to the individual and wanting to do that personal work and growing in that. I do think it's important to mention as well that the boundaries are important because we have to keep each other safe and the children safe. So depending on the child, how young they are, and what the situation is, if it's actually unsafe and it's not stopping straight away, I may have to actually go and say stop first, because the most important thing is making sure everyone's safe. So in those moments I do have to do that. And another caveat to add is that where children are really dysregulated, so if someone's really, really upset, they can't even hear me yet. So I wouldn't start the calm process until a child is regulated enough to be able to hear anything. But I found a strategy which has helped me through those moments, and it's called the bubble cup. So you simply fill a cup of water halfway with, so it's a cup half filled with water and a straw inside. And you were talking about when we're shut down, what we do is we take a breath in and we hold and we constrict. And the bubble cup is trying to do the opposite of that, which is to help children to exhale, to release, but also to exhale well, because the longer the exhale can be, the more regulated the nervous system will be too. So I'll model it with the children. I'll blow into the cup. The bubbles will start to appear. It's quite a nice sensory experience. It makes noise. You can watch the bubbles. And young children tend to respond quite well to this. So I'd label their bubble cup. They would see that it's theirs. And in the moments where they need that, we'd go to that first, and then we do the calm later, because first I want them to feel regulated. Yeah. And then they'll be able to benefit from the calm.
Oh, that's brilliant. The bubble cup. I'm going to use that. That's amazing, because it makes it fun for them. What kid doesn't like to blow bubbles, And it's really great that you're coming up with ideas that are fun, that they're engaging in something and not having to necessarily sit cross-legged and do yogic breathing exercises, which kids have a hard time sitting still. So having like blowing bubbles, wow, that's such a cool idea. Yes, I just want to let our audience know we're not live, but we're recording. Ron is feeling under the weather today, so if you see him sniffling or going off screen, that's why. So, you have your tea with you. What are you drinking, Ron?
I'm drinking my lemon and ginger hot water. Okay. Thank you very much, Ade. Yes. So thank you very much for proceeding with the conversation while I've been running in and out and having coughing fits.
So how have the have you noticed any what have you noticed about the kids, and anything in particular that, like, I guess I would call it their evolution as you've been doing this process? Are they seeming to go to some of these things naturally, and feeling more sort of comfortable communicating what their emotions are and things of this nature?
Yes, I've definitely seen quite profound shifts for some children. Um, Last year, I worked with a child who really benefited from the bubble cup. He eventually came to me in the moments he needed it the most, and he would just say, "I need my bubble cup." And yeah, then he would use it, and then he'd go back to the situation, or he might actually decide, "I don't want to go back to that situation. I'm ready to do something else now." But the bubble cup was really helpful for him. And yeah, I think I noticed a real shift in his ability to regulate his emotions and regulate his body and to respond to his sensations and what he needed. So I've definitely noticed it for some children more than others, but this is the second year group I'm using it with. And yeah, this year there are already a couple of children who will come and ask me for it quite regularly. And
Yeah.
sometimes they're not even, the beauty of it is actually, and I did actually make one for every member of staff in the room because I benefit from it.
Yeah.
And this was the first year I realized every time a child needs it, that's a perfect time for me to get my dose as well. So we can do it together. And then there's the element of we're connecting, but also I'm getting my self-regulation time, you're getting your self-regulation time. That's something I missed last year, but this year I worked out actually I'm going to take these opportunities to do it myself as well. Because it's a strategy which I suppose if you think about the biology of it, just breathing well, the more you can do that, the better it is for your well-being. I was recently introduced to the concept of the vagus nerve and
Yeah.
how
Just
that
gonna
links
say that.
directly to your gut. It's all about self-regulation, your parasympathetic nervous system. And in order to strengthen that, things like singing, exhaling well, having cold showers, they really help. So yeah, the bubble cup is helping us to breathe. And I think it does have real impact, not just in the moments we really need it, but I've got a child who appears to be well regulated. She doesn't have really moments where I need to set limits. There aren't really any of those at all. But she just comes to me at numerous points in the day and says, "Please can I have my bubble cup?" Because I think it's doing something to soothe her, and she likes that. It makes her feel good. So yeah, I think it's important to know that it's not just for the moments where the emotions are getting too big. It's also just a nice thing to have access to throughout the day to help us to feel generally more balanced.
Yeah, that's a good point. That regulating, or or just doing it just to have that sense of just because it feels good, being in that habit of doing the long exhale. And I like that you do the regulation with them and teach them the self-regulation before um, beginning the calm practice part, because that's so important. A lot of times when kids are feeling overwhelmed, or adults, they're given instructions. Well, why don't you just do this? Or, this is why you shouldn't feel this way, or, and the kid is just like feeling overwhelmed, especially, all kids are different. Like kids on the spectrum, they're going to take longer to, regulate and get back to that set point. And,
One of
if
my
you give,
colleagues,
oh, go ahead.
shared with me the other day that it actually takes on average 40 minutes, or minimum, I think she said 40 minutes after an event for a child's stress levels to come back down.
Wow.
So I suppose what I've observed with the bubble cup is that actually, if you can direct that stress level into something that's actually quite soothing, you can, well, from my observations, it could be that the stress levels are still there. I'm still navigating this with the new information that I have. But yeah, I feel that the bubble cup helps the stress levels to come down. Yeah, so I think you're right, and every child is different. Some children might take much longer than that to recalibrate, and it's important that we stay aware.
Yeah, I'm going to use the bubble cup. I'm going to try that with my kids, because they love blowing bubbles, into cups.
Yeah.
Usually when
we all did it when we were children. It was just a natural, instinct. It was an instinct, wasn't it, to play bubbles?
Yeah. So when they say, when the world changes and kids become emotionally healthy and able to self-regulate, and 20 years from now, they're going to look and say, well, what made the big difference? And they're going to say it was the bubble cup. That was the groundbreaking thing. So we're almost at an hour. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to discuss?
Only another anecdote I remembered from the bubble cup, while we're talking about the bubble cup. A child who feels a lot of anger when he can't have the toys that he wants in that moment. And I've managed to, with the calm emotion coaching and the make a plan bit, help him to remember to squeeze his hands when he's feeling that. And that, I suppose, is a way of constricting it. But then what we would do is we'd go and find the bubble cup together, and that's where he would release it. So I almost did it in two parts. First of all, we hold it and then we go to release it, because in the moment that there needs to be some way of containing what's happening there physically. So I found that two-part system of holding it and then releasing it is working quite well. But yeah, I'm finding that actually every child, as we know, is so different, and every child can teach me something new. So I'm grateful to the children for giving me all these different experiences. And yeah,
that's wonderful. I think Ron, did you have any other questions or?
No. Thank you, Ade. Lily, it's been really wonderful to have you here and for inviting me into your nursery twice. And I've got one anecdote, if I can get it out, which was I had a friend. She always used to walk around with the old thing we had in school, and we blew bubbles. You pull it into the pot, and you took it out, and you blew bubbles. So we were on a packed tube station in rush hour traffic, all adults in their suits and ties and whatever. So she gets out her bubbles and starts to blow on the tube. And then I witnessed a change in the carriage. This person starts laughing, this person starts smiling. She walks over there and blows bubble to this really serious person, and he starts smiling. And I witnessed a change in 2 minutes, all because of bubbles. And in fact, I went to find where I could find some of these bubbles. So maybe that's something that we have to look at in regards to the importance of bubbles.
Yeah, there's something about bubbles. My kids love bubbles too. And Lily, thank you so much. This was wonderful conversation. I feel I'm so glad we did it, because I think it's your message and what you're teaching is so important. Something that I think it would be very beneficial to the viewers and to myself. So I'm definitely going to do a bubble cup with my kids. And I love the calm, that's brilliant. Every part of it is just, also the that idea of holding, teaching kids to hold so that you're not having some strength, some restraint when needed, so you don't harm yourself or others, but then finding a healthy way to release that is really, really good. So thank you for joining. And yeah. So.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a really interesting conversation for me too. And I would love to just take a note of the guy you were talking about, his books that you like.
Oh yeah. I will. It's Gabor Mate. Ron, what was? I think you're more familiar with the books. I watch all the videos. The
books, The Body Says No. I will send you all
When
these
the Body
links
Says No.
as soon as we finish here. It links to his podcast, YouTube, and to his Amazon, where you can buy his books.
That would be great. Thank you. And I loved your bubble on the tube story as well.
Yeah, he did a podcast recently, which he was promoting his book, When the Unnatural Becomes Natural. So he's saying the way that we're living in the West is unnatural, and it's become natural. And it's really toxic the way that we're living, but it's become natural, and it's actually praised. So like people that are really harming and killing themselves, maybe working 16 hours a day, like doing things that are just not healthy, we praise them. And so that's our culture. So it's a toxic environment. And in this podcast, he really talks a lot about some of the issues of why our world is the way that it is. So if you want kind of like an encapsulated version of some of his teachings, I think his most recent podcasts, and I'll send you remember that I sent you the link to that one, right? That he did one recently, but I'll send one. Get that podcast to you as well. And the books are great, so I've heard.
Talking about, you just reminded me about how the things that the Western world gives value to. I read a really amazing book. It's more climate change focused, but it's called Less is More, How Degrowth Can Save the World, I think is the title. And yeah, I think it's got a real spiritual dimension, but also it focuses a lot on the history of capitalism and why there could be a different way. But yeah, I feel like...
What was the name of it?
How Degrowth... Less is More.
Less is More.
It's a bright green cover, neon green. How Degrowth Can Save the World.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll look for that. Okay. So, and thank you to the viewers that will be seeing this on YouTube. So we're going to, and we'll send you the YouTube link once it's uploaded and everything. And, so you can share it to anyone you wish. And thanks again. It was such a pleasure to meet you. And hopefully you can join us again sometime.
Thank you so much for having me, Ron and Ade. I've had a really fun afternoon.
Thanks.
Thank you, Lily.